All right, we've got some news for the Seattle Seahawks, obviously looking to move off of last week's defeat, getting ready for a big game this Sunday and going forward. But ahead of that game, the Seahawks made a very interesting, kind of a smart roster move, a new addition to the Seahawks roster. Let's pull up the report from CBS Sports, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. All right, the Seattle Seahawks are signing a former rival quarterback. As ESPN reports, Seattle has added Brett Rippon to its practice squad. Rippon started for the Los Angeles Rams in their 20-3 loss to the Green Bay Packers last weekend. What's interesting about this transaction is that Seattle plays Los Angeles in 9 days, so Rippon can maybe give head coach Pete Carroll just a little bit of a look of how the Rams are run. If you recall, I'm sure Seahawks fans definitely recall this, the Rams upset the Seahawks in Seattle in the season opener 30-13. Now, I don't think this is going to be a situation where Brett Rippon's just going to hand over, the Rams calls and signals and things like that. I don't think that's what's going on here, but I do think it's a pretty crafty move by Pete Carroll and Schneider with everything they're doing here. Because basically, I guarantee you, Sean McVay and the Rams are sitting there like, oh crap, do we have to change anything? Because we know that Rippon knows our signals, but the Rams know that the Seahawks know that the Rams know that Rippon knows their signals. So there's just going to be this crazy little dilemma here where the Rams are basically have to spend some time and energy maybe thinking about changing their signals, maybe not, right? Instead of focusing on game planning, instead of focusing on preparing for the Seahawks next week, and not this weekend, but next weekend, they're going to have to spend a little bit of energy focusing on what Rippon could potentially share to Seattle in terms of signals and play calling and things like that, which is very common in the NFL. By the way, it's very well documented that when players go to new teams, there's usually a debriefing section where they share some information. Now, in terms of how much information will be shared and how significant it will be, I think it's going to be minimal, but the fact that the threat of it may be being significant, that will play in Sean McVay's mind, and the Rams will have to react to that, which will take valuable time away from game planning, which could give the Seahawks an advantage. So overall, I think it's a pretty crafty move by the Seattle Seahawks. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, Mize, but before I hand it over to you, obviously got a big matchup tomorrow, Sunday, against Washington. Don't want to say it's a must win, but it is a winnable game at this point in the season. Give us your prediction, Seahawks fans, in the comment section below. Seattle versus Washington, final score. But Miles, what do you think of this move from Seattle and what impact it could have against them or for them going forward?
Yeah, I think it's really important because, like you said, big game or probably a pretty important game to win this weekend versus the Commanders. What are the Rams doing this weekend? They're on a bye. They're not doing anything. They're game planning for Seattle. So they have an advantage against Seattle and the fact that they have the bye to plan. Rams kind of on a little bit of a slide right now, trying to kind of get their feet back underneath them after, a couple, 3 straight losses in a row. They want to get back on track. So what do? Prepare for somebody they've known for a very long time in Seattle. They've been playing each other twice a year for whoever knows how long. Now, there's a little bit of a wrinkle, like you said. There's something in the books. Seattle can't do anything about the fact that the Rams have a bye. What they can do is just throw that little bit of a wrinkle in there and get them thinking, get them their heads spinning, saying, hey, should we change this? Should we do this? What's our new attack plan? Everything is coming back into the fold. And just to say, Rippon started for the Rams last game versus the Packers. Matt Stafford is freshly coming back in, so there's a little bit of added pressure, and they're getting Matt Stafford back up to speed, making sure he's healthy. So anything that Seattle can do to kind of put the Rams behind the 8 ball and the fact they have a bye, I think is a really smart move by Pete Carroll and co. I think they're doing just anything they can to give themselves a leg up when the Rams already had one.
And there's another thing, kind of another factor that's kind of forgotten with moves like this. Smart teams always try and steal from other smart teams. I think the Seahawks are clearly better than the Rams, but the reality is we can all admit Sean McVay is a really smart offensive guy. So you bring in a guy in Rippon, obviously quarterback for the Rams earlier this season. He had a lot of smart discussions with McVay, right, in terms of game planning. Okay, how are we going to play against this team? How are we going to match up against the 49ers, for example? What were the game plans against Dallas? Things like that. Teams that the Seattle Seahawks are going to have to beat the second half of the season. When you bring in Rippon and say, hey, what was McVay's thoughts against Dallas? He says, hey, we need to do this to block Micah Parsons. I guarantee you the offensive coaching staff for the Seattle Seahawks will be like, that's a good idea. We may want to borrow that too. That's a very commonplace as well. Coaches and teams are always trying to steal smart ideas from other players, But the reality is, if you're a team like the Rams, you're not going to broadcast to the world what your game plan was. A way you can kind of steal or borrow, let's say, use it like that, from a smart team is to get one of their players. So not only will this help the Seattle Seahawks potentially just by putting a wrench into the Rams game planning process, it'll also let them get a peek into Sean McVay's mind, who's obviously a very smart offensive strategist. So no matter how you look at it, this is a really smart move by the Seattle Seahawks. It's kind of a sneaky good move. Didn't hear a whole lot about it, of course, in terms of everything going on in the news, but it could potentially be a big impact. It'll be interesting to see how it works out over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, Nick, and you say that, and that's a great point too, because after the Rams, they play the 49ers twice. That could be a team the Rams definitely were familiar with. McVay's thoughts on there. I think the Seahawks kind of have a brutal schedule coming up after the Rams. 49ers twice, Cowboys, Eagles. I mean, the next 4 games, that's tough. But like you said, any kind of leg up they can get, any kind of thought process they can get. Okay, how'd y'all do against the 49ers? What'd you do here? What did you do there? I think that's a really great move by Pete Carroll. And I just think this is the kind of move that helps Seattle get back on track. Obviously, there's only so much you can do player acquisition. The team is the team right now. There's not too many guys out there that you could pick up to help. Now you got to pick up the mentality, the game planning, all of those kind of aspects. And this is why this was a really smart move. Not that Brett Rippon is going to help in the quarterback room and, make them a better quarterback unit. He's going to make them better mentally prepared for the opponents that's coming up.